Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirmayedhi Rudro Yatte Dakshinam Mukham Tena Mam Pahi Nityam Tena Mam Pahi Nityam Tena Mam Pahi Nityam Om Shanti 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 Om Madhuvatarithayate Madhuksharanti Sindhavaha माधवेन सन्तोषधीः मधुनक्तमुतोषसि मधुमत्पार्थिवगुं रजः मधुद्यौरस्तु नापिता मधुमानो वनस्पति मधुमागुम् अस्तु सूर्यः माध्वीर्गावो भवन्तु नः Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this platform. This is the second webinar in this series to commemorate the 125th year of Sister Nivedita's arrival in India. The panel discussion will be on Margaret's inspiration and motivation before taking up this historical voyage. The entire program is conceptualized and organized by a group of young alumni of RKSM Sister Nivedita Girls School. The eldest one is the pass out of 1985 and the youngest one is the pass out of 2015. So they are spanning over 30 years. They are participating from different location and they are united by the spirit of sister. Let me request Shatavisha Pati, the coordinator of this group, to start the proceedings of this evening. Shatavisha.
On January 28, 1898, the Calcutta docks stood witness of a historical moment as Margaret Elizabeth Noble arrived in India for the first time, and this year is the 125th anniversary of her auspicious arrival. On this remarkable day, even Swami Vivekananda was personally present in the dock to receive her. This gesture alone sheds dim light on the exceptionality of the guest concerned. The clarion call of Swami Vivekananda worked as a driving force to draw a young Scot-Irish English woman who could have had a wonderful life and a successful career in her own country and among her own people, beloved friends and relatives, with the talent she possessed and the genius that she was. Now we may wonder how was London at the time when Margot, with her versatile talents, left her country. In the 1890s, London was one of the most exciting cities in the world, with an atmosphere of learning and erudition in the fields of science and art, philosophy and education, and a constant influx of people with new ideas and experiences. At that time, Margaret established her own school in Wimbledon. With Lady Ripon and others, she started the Cicene Club, where Bernard Shaw and Thomas Huxley were regular visitors. Margaret was recognized there as an excellent orator and prolific writer. With all these stories that we read about Margaret and her life in England, that she was always a doer, an empowered woman who would never put her efforts on something unless she was highly convinced about it. So why did she come to India after all? Today, we are holding a panel discussion to try to understand the root causes behind Margaret's arrival to our country and becoming Sister Nivedita. the one who dedicated and devoted her whole life for the welfare of Indian people. The topic of our discussion is the inspiration and motivation behind Sister Nivedita's arrival to India. Five different aspects have been identified around this theme. First, we would focus on Sister's involvement in educating the women of India. Then we would make a comparative study on her operations in India along with other contemporary European reformers. On the next part of our discussion, we would have a brief note on the impact of Irish Home Rule movement in Sister's life and try to find out if it motivated her to help India fight for her own independence. From the perspective of social science, we would also touch the topic of gender quotient in Sister's decision to come to India. And lastly, our fellow speakers would have an elaborate conversation over the most important catalyst of Sister's arrival in India, and that is Swamiji's influence. Myself, Satavita, heartily welcome you all who have joined us in our panel today. Our panelists are represented in two groups, Team A, the young, and Team B, the veteran. We would like to see the differences in approach, if any, between the two groups representing two generations in understanding and assessing the decision to come to India on the part of Margaret Elizabeth Noble. In Team A, we have Rima Bhattacharya, who is doing MSc in Applied Microbiology at Banaras Hindu University and is a former student of Sister Nivedita Girls' School. Nitra Mukherjee, Assistant Professor of English, Gargi College, University of Delhi, and also a former student of Sister Nivedita Girls' School. In Team B, we have Smita Nag, an eminent classical musician, assistant teacher of Putiari Brojamohan Seaway Institution, Kolkata, and a former student of Sister Nivedita Girls' School. Pravrajika Atmadipa Prana from Sri Sharada Math. I am Satavita Pati, coordinator of this event and also a former student of Sister Nivedita Girls' School, currently stationed in Hyderabad as a content analyst in Analytics Inside. Without further delay, let's begin this most awaited exchange of opinions. The first point of our discussion is educating the women of India. Now, I will hand over this conversation to Rima of Team A.
Good evening, everyone. So today, first of all I'll talk about how the sister's motivation behind coming to India from the perspective of education. So we all know that Margaret came across Swami Vivekananda in 1895, and she came to India in 1898. She was influenced by Swamiji definitely, but according to me, she also wanted to educate our people. If we look into Margaret's activity when she was in England, we can see her diverse activities in the field of education, from child education to understanding their psychology while teaching. She made some significant effort in teaching process by making it more student directed or student friendly. She was highly influenced by Pestalozzi and Froebel and started teaching at a very young age, like she was at 17 when she started to do so. So we can see that teaching was somehow her inherent passion, and she also started her own school in Wilmington in 1891. She was ready to adapt different methods to make her approach more inclusive and student friendly. The scientific inquisitiveness gave her the confidence to take up challenges to be faced in an alien land like India with strikingly different socio-cultural conditions. As a British colony in India, the modern education was mostly the acquisition of reading and learning skills to manage a job. It was never very much oriented to our own culture and heritage. Apart from this, if we look into our education system, we can also find that was not much inclusive. For the perspective of women education, it was also very much limited. Like the girls from upper caste and affluent socio-economic background could get some exposure. But Margaret was unique in her teaching style because she incorporated teaching mythology, culture, told the story of ancient India and her glory while teaching. So not only this, incorporating several tools like map, globe, using seeds while teaching arithmetic was also very much new at that point of time. Her students were from different sections of our society, They're from different age group and different socioeconomic background. So she was able to bring students from some unwillingly families too. So here I just want to point out that her passion and innovative approach towards the process of teaching was very much novel at that point of time. Well, I also want to add that her feminist approach, when I'm talking about her teaching process, like the way she empowered students, the way she talked about the woman independence at that era was something very new. Because if we solely focus on the spiritual motivation, somehow this point may get diluted. So this is my opinion.
Thank you,
And
Rima. Let us see. Sorry.
yes, I was also talking something like, yeah, so
Yeah,
as I
tell
was
me.
saying that apart from the spiritual motivation, there was the feminist approach too. And after a new incarnation, she accepted women of India the way they are, not enforcing the cultural practices. Her dedication and hard work, indomitable approach towards her goal made her significant educators who truly gave her all for the development and enlightenment of our country.
Thank you, Rima. Now let us see what Team B has in store for us on this point.
Well, namaste. So, it's a well-known fact that Swami Vivekananda invited Sister Nivedita so that she can open a school for educating Indian girls. But not what many know that Swamiji visited her school, the model school run by Sister, and he was very much impressed by the way she was running that school. And as he was watching this process, he was also sad because for him, he knew very well that education in his homeland was reserved only for a very few, like the elite group, only they had the opportunity to educate themselves. And for the majority, even though they had great potentials in contributing immensely in various fields, but they were not able to get that education. Swamiji always believed that education will solve all the problems, and especially because he felt this. And in West also in America, when he went there, there was a little girl. She was explaining her school experiences to Swamiji. Then she was very surprised to see tears in Swamiji's eyes. When Swamiji always felt the need of educating Indian children, especially women. Now, I agree with Rima that sister came here and wanted to educate Indian girls, but it was not the sole motivation. Like we all know how multi-talented Nivedita was, and there was so much of activity going on in her life, and she was very successful materially. But it was the Vedantic ideas of Swamiji that motivated her to come to India and changed her life course radically. Adi Shankara says there are three qualities which are very rare. Only if you have divine grace, you can have them. They are Manushyatva, Mumukshatva, and Mahapurusha Samshraya, meaning a human body and a desire to be free from all bondages, and finally, the company of an illumined soul. Now, sister had these two blessings, and when she came and met Swami Vivekananda, her guru, the third grace descended on her. And there is also another saying that Astaryo Bhakta Kushalanu Shishta, Astaryo Nyata Kushalanu Shishta. It's Astaryo Bhakta, meaning that it's very rare to find a very good teacher, and it's equally difficult to find a very good student who is willing to accept his views and mold her life accordingly. Now, sister was being from a foreign country. Sister could appreciate the cultural and spiritual wealth which India could offer, and she wanted to mold her life in front of Swamiji. And it's also a known fact that if you do not have an ideal, then highest philosophies are never practiced. Like it's okay if it's in theory, but you want somebody in front of you, a living person who will demonstrate it to you, and then only you get inspired by that person to that extent that she left everything and she came to India. So this is what I feel. And another thing, I think that Swamiji said that Atmano Mokshatam Jagaditaya cha, you must work for your own good, mukti, liberation, and also you must strive to do the welfare for others. And that thing was not appreciated even by many of his Indian counterparts in the beginning. When he advocated this, many could not understand this viewpoint of Swamiji. But sister could appreciate it, and she was ready to mold herself in this idea. And she came to India, and when Swamiji invited her, it was a welcome note for her. So that's what I feel.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you to both teams for explaining it so well. On the next part, we will discuss about contemporary Europeans who work for the welfare of India. I would request Netra from Team A to enlighten us more on this matter.
সবাইকে প্রণাম So a number of Europeans came to India with philanthropic interest. We know that. But a few of them tried to understand Indian culture in Indian way. I want to mention two very important personalities in this regard, and they are William Kerry and Annie Besant. The reason behind this choice will be self-evident. William Kerry was one of the educators who is still remembered, especially in Hooghly district. We completely agree with the fact that he was a missionary, a small part of the huge crusade that colonial Indian government carried on for years. But we can't deny his contribution to the literacy movement in rural Bengal. He was the person who translated Ramayana in English. He was the person who closely observed Bengali colloquial language and tried to decipher it and kept a record of it for the fellow Britishers. So, though he was a missionary, we can't avoid the fact that he passionately engaged with Indian culture at the very grassroots level. Annie Besant was one of the most prolific ones among the others. And she did not have the stamp of a missionary though. Rather, she vehemently criticized Christianity. She was also from Irish background, extremely passionate about freedom. She was an ardent supporter of the idea of nationalism in India. She fought against the caste system and child marriage in India. Initially, Besant was a socialist in heart. She was an atheist activist, but later in her life, she became influenced by theosophy and completely surrendered herself to spirituality. She became one of the founders of BHU. It's unknown to a lot of us that she represented the Theosophical Society at the Chicago Convention in 1893. The transformation from a completely Western person to ideologically an Indian person was there. Moreover, she actively contributed to the Swaraj movement. She fought politically for the change in colonial Indian society. The freedom and progress of India remained a burning desire in her throughout her life.
Thank you, Netra. Now let's hear it from Meeta of Team B.
Yes, pranams and namaskar to all of you. Netra has already talked about the mission of Western educationists, philanthropists, and scholars like William Kerry and Annie Besant. But I would now just try to see how sisters' approach was different from the other Western educationists of her time. Now, anybody who is familiar with the life of Sister knows that she was a born teacher, and she also fought for women's rights in Ireland, believing, like her would-be master, Swamiji, that the true development of a nation is impossible if her women are not empowered with education, and hence freedom. Without education, there can be no freedom. Now, her contemporary women educationists like Anna Ackroyd or Mary Carpenter, they both came here with an attitude of helping backward people who they believed were immersed in darkness, superstition, and ignorance. They had come to work in India with a high handed attitude to educate our colonial native women to make them worthy of the elite class, at par with their anglicized husbands. And most of the Christian missionaries who came here wanted to indoctrinate our girls in Christian ideals. But what makes Margaret Noble radically exceptional is that she totally immersed in the Vedantic truth as revealed to her by Swami Vivekananda and initiated into the philosophy as respected Atma Pranaji has previously mentioned. Atmanu Mokshatham Jagat Hitayacha. Margaret contemplated her travel to India to internalize the best and highest of our own tradition, which she discovered in the ideals of Indian womanhood as revealed to her through her conversations with Shamji. She discovered in Amazing Grace that the Indian woman was not ignorant at all. Rather, she was already emancipated in her domestic sphere, in her duties of the home, in her great craftsmanship, and in adorning the home. That charity begins at home was already ingrained in the Indian womanhood. So, education should be aimed at teaching our girls to learn our literature, history, and art to bring out their natural skill and talents through work education. She vehemently protested those, quote, I'm quoting sister, those who educate an Indian girl to be an ornament of English or French society commit a crime. Sister's career as a teacher in different schools in Ireland had also provided her with a deep insight into the methods which should be ideal for teaching young children, because in those days the women were actually young girls. After meeting Shamiji, she felt motivated that her experience and experiments in the field of kindergarten education in Ireland would definitely help her in applying the most appropriate mode of teaching required for the Indian women. Her immense self confidence inspired her to leave her homeland for the cause of India and her women. With her infinite vision of her alma mater, Bharat Mata, Sister kindled the lives of Indian women with that inextinguishable flame that Swami Vivekananda had ignited in her.
Thanks to you both for elaborating this point so eloquently. Now we would look at the impact of home rule movement in Ireland on sisters' arrival to India. Let's hear it from Rima of Team A.
So, when we talk about her inspiration to come to India, we definitely address the burning inspiration Vivekananda himself and Vedantic philosophy. But analyzing the context of 1890s, I also think she was somehow motivated by some political interest which is completely based on nationalism. Like she was a free spirit from her childhood, we know. Swamiji in his letters to Margaret mentioned her Celtic blood, her legacy and ethnicity that drove her in this way to grow up in such a free spirit. We know that her grandparent was an active member of the Home Rule movement. Ireland was also a British colony like India. So sister grew up seeing revolutionary movements and uncompromising love for the freedom. If we go through her letters or activities that she wrote after coming to India, people like Barin Ghosh, Bhupen Datto, Aurobindo Ghosh, and others regarding revolutionary activities against British rule in India, that we will understand her warrior spirit earns respect from all of us. Her interest in extremist movement was mostly fueled by home rule in Ireland. She was the perfect combination of mother's heart and hero's will in every possible way. And her motivation was not that of a standard do-gooder who is trying to uplift downtrodden people by standing on a pedestal. She felt for them and became one of them. Her work and contribution was because of her burning passion, strong willpower, and immense empathy. Uh, it's true that when she came to India, she did not take some motive to join revolutionary movement, but she understood the importance to support the extremist movement at that time. And I think her childhood and upbringing was thus a major force behind her decision to come to India, and later her activities were also driven by them. So, this is my opinion, and that's how I feel.
Thank you, Rima. I would now request Team B to share their perception on this matter.
She is right, Rima is right. Upbringing of an individual and a family plays a very vital role in shaping the future course of an individual, any individual for that matter. Like sister belong to a Catholic Christian background, and we have Christian nuns going all over the world. Actually, globally, they used to travel and they used to undertake this missionary work, but they focus mainly on conversion. And as she said that even though they had that militant like missionary spirit, but they undertook many welfare activities, but everything was based on this view that you are going to convert yourself to my point of view. Otherwise, I am not going to respect you like that. So this was a very major difference. Sister respected us. And secondly, when sister was born and brought up, Ireland was undergoing its freedom struggle, and it could be compared to a boiler, and women were also not left out. They used to help the prisoners, like freedom fighters. They used to smuggle arms, and they used to carry messages, like they were called the eyes and ears of freedom fighters. And they used to conduct secret meetings. And even once, I just read that they conducted a meeting in a lavatory so that they will not be discovered. So this was the level to which they went, and they used to support the army also, like they financially, and they had an army. They had a women's army. So all these things had an influence on Margaret. But another thing is, she felt that British rule was beneficiary to Indians. Now, this was a very strange thing. She was influenced in that way. And it was much later when she came to India that she was disillusioned. But what she did for the welfare of India and all this revolutionary movement, how she supported them and helped them, it's a very vast topic. So I think in future maybe we will discuss that. But one thing is, sister had a personality that she could never be forced into anything. Like if she believed in a principle, she will give everything. But she could never be forced. So in that way, she was a rebel. But as a rebel, she was always constructive, never destructive. So this is what I feel.
Thank you, Mataji. I would like to thank both the teams for this detailed explanation. Now it is time for us to have a conversation on the gender quotient of this matter. Let's hear it from Team A.
So my question is, if Shamiji was not there as a constant guide, would it have been possible for her to reach common people and to convince them to trust her with their daughters? We can't forget the fact that we are talking about that Bengal when women were not supposed to be educated. Even if they were just given the education of basic household skills. As Rajshekhar Boshu comments on 19th century women education in Bengal, they were just knitting, they were just saving. They were not provided with any actual education as such, which could have been a great help for them to be self-sufficient. On the other hand, we can't deny the fact how the women around her accepted her with open arms, how Sharodama became a mother and guide to Nivedita. This would not have happened if she was not a woman. That too, a woman with great capacity to fathom a situation and gracefully embracing the culture in question. So the question remains, was it easier for her to convince people since as a woman she had the opportunity to reach the Ondur Mahal? Whereas if we think about other foreign educators like John Drinkwater Bethune, they were secluded not only because they are just outsiders, but because they were men. Again, another question that I find really fascinating is that how she managed to balance the Western liberal fighter and the Eastern patient receptor in her. She was essentially a freedom seeker. I can't even imagine the courage it would have taken for a woman at that point of time to come to India from a faraway land and not only to stay there, but to become one of the locals.
Thank you, Netra. Now let's see what Team B has to say on this matter.
Unmute.
I'm sorry. So I very much agree with Netra's point that to come to India and to just reach the women in the Andar Mahal required immense courage and strength for Margaret Noble, Sister Nivedita. Now, of course, as a woman, she had one advantage point because the Indian girls who lived behind the veil, they would find a woman more acceptable to them than the man, and they would feel more comfortable to open up to her. So it was very, I think that gave one advantage to sister that she could come closer to the Indian girls being a woman. Now, regarding education, sister never thought that the Indian woman was uneducated. No. Rather, she knew that the Indian woman was the ideal woman. And even to be at home, you need education, even to man empowerment and enlightenment to be truly free. And about the gender quotient, I just want to mention that in sister's contemporary social scenario, educating the woman was regarded as ominous. And the orthodox upper class Hindus, they never wanted to give formal education to the women. Here, we should mention the name of Pandit Ishwarchandra Bidyasagar. We know his hard work to set up girls' school throughout Bengal. And we also know that in his endeavor, how he faced a great challenge and how he was ridiculed. He was made an object of parodies by all the contemporary Orthodox Hindus of the time. But with sister, we see that she was as caring and loving as a mother, and she had the determination of a thunderbolt. It is true that she embraced the Indian way of life and she was mentally prepared to face any resistance that might come in her way. But it was all possible for her because of Holy Mother Sharoda Devi's support and assurance. Mother provided her with all the mental strength to overcome the opposition that initially had worried her. So, Mother was actually a divine shelter. She was like a banyan tree that gave sister strength, inspiration, confidence, and peace, even amidst her hardship here. So, it was all possible for her to carry out her mission because of Holy Mother's support. She was always there behind her, her love and her strength, her spiritual strength, her divine strength made it possible for sister to carry out her mission. This is what I have to say about the gender quotient. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitali. I'm very glad to hear such interesting suggestions from both the teams. Now, the last and the most awaiting point of our discussion here is the influence of Swamiji. Here we are requesting the veteran team, that is our team B, to take up on this issue.
So, worthy guru's worthiest disciple. Now, in Swami Vivekananda's lectures and his conversations with her in the West, Miss Margaret Noble had discovered the soul of India. She felt deeply the fate of our people under British bondage and particularly the plight of our women. You know that Swamiji always believed that a bird cannot fly with one wing. So if a nation has to be empowered, it's not possible only with the power of the men. The women should also be equally empowered to make the nation free. And so let us now see through sister's own eyes what she thought about, what vision she had about her India, and this vision she saw through her master Swami Vivekananda. Now, in her reminiscence, the master, as I saw him, she writes under the title Response to India. I quote, "There was one thing, however, deep in the master's nature that he never knew how to adjust. This was his love of his country and his resentment of her suffering. Throughout those years in which I saw him almost daily, the thought of India was to him like the air he breathed." She goes on further to say, I quote, "He neither used the word nationality nor proclaimed an era of nation making, but he was a born lover, and queen of his adoration was his motherland. Like some delicately poised bell, and vibrated by every sound that falls upon it, was his heart to all that concerned her." As I'm reading this, sister's writing, I'm having goosebumps. So it is not difficult to trace back the inspiration and motivation that Swamiji's words had upon this woman, who I believe was no less a born lover than Swamiji himself, who transformed herself magnificently to surrender her all to Mother India. And this Nivedan or offering that sister was preparing for aimed at a holistic rebuilding of the nation. Swamiji had taught her to construct her thoughts along the national line, though he never consciously uttered the word nationality. He did not need to, for in his everyday interaction with Miss Margaret Noble, he implanted in her mind the seed of a regenerated India. And I can just recall Gore's famous poem in this context, with which I'll finish my point of view, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come out from the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection. So Margaret's arrival to India thus marks an ageless confluence where the West meets the East to unite in the philosophy of one eternal truth of the Vedanta. And that was how Swamiji had influenced her with the nationalistic spirit. Thank you.
Well, to conclude, I would like to say that because I belong to a spiritual organization, I firmly believe in a divine providence. So that divine providence arranges everything for everybody, and it also arranged for sister to come to India. And Swamiji once said, as Mitadi said, the best of East must unite with West to form about an ideal society. And I always feel that why sister did not participate more in Ireland? Why did she come to India? So this was a question that has always attracted me. And I feel that Ireland was an advantage compared to India. Like first of all, we had to face a magnanimous problems like geographically, we are 47 times bigger than Ireland. And secondly, Ireland did not have so much of cultural or religious diversification. And then they did not have any inaccessible terrain. So whenever the dynamic leaders of Ireland said something or advocated something, they could find the direct and concentrated effort. That echoed in all the Irish citizens, which was quite difficult here. Like even though people participated and they were inspired by freedom things like ideas, it was very much needed for sister to come here. Like this is what I feel. And secondly, it was a call from the heart to the heart, like the sweetness, spirituality, and simplicity of Indian women pulled Sister Nivedita. So she came over to India, and again Swamiji was there. Like many appreciated Swamiji, he has initiated many supported him financially, and Swamiji has even given monastic vows to the few when he was in the best. And but not all came here and gave everything. Like there were some who visited here. They were well wishers. They cooperated with Indian ideals and they supported Swamiji's mission. But it was only and only Sister Nivedita who gave her all, everything. And again, like as I previously said, it's very difficult to find a competent teacher, and it's more difficult to find a competent student who is willing to mold herself and to be a copy, not a carbon copy. Like she was not an exact carbon copy of Swamiji. She took all that spirit from Swamiji, but she applied her own way also. And so it's a beautiful blending. And this beautiful blending of a spiritual teacher and disciple has brought in immense benefits, especially to our country. And today we are having a webinar in a free country with educated women expressing their views. We all have independent views, like each and every one of us are presenting sister, analyzing her in so many various ways. And the contribution which sister had and Swamiji had is immense. And especially for women of Bengal, sister was a boon. So I feel that the day sister actually, when she met Holy Mother, you all know that she had written in a diary that it's the day of days. So I feel that the day when sister accepted Swamiji's call and entered the Kidirpur dock, that's a red letter day for us. It's a day of days for us. So thank you all for giving me an opportunity.
Thank you so much, Mataji. I would like to congratulate Team B for enlightening us with such well references on this point. Margaret was moved and inspired to see the tremendous love for India in patriot prophet Swami Vivekananda and his ceaseless thought for the upliftment of his countrymen. Swamiji earnestly wanted a lioness for the education and upliftment of Indian women. He also wanted Western science to be coupled with Vedanta in Indian education, which would solve the miseries and problems of Indian women and the masses. In Margaret, Swami Vivekananda saw the lioness he had been waiting for. She was the dynamic agent that Swami Vivekananda had chosen and named as Nivedita, the dedicated to put his nation-building thoughts into action. He had hoped that Nivedita would be able to work out a solution for reconciling the old and the new. As Nivedita put it, it was to find ways to nationalize the modern and modernize the old. At the end of this panel discussion, I would like to request our respected Sharmila Ji to say a few words regarding this panel and discuss and also give her vote of thanks.
Thank you all, the speakers and the coordinator. I am really impressed by the way you have conceptualized and organized this very pertinent discussion. The impact of sisters' personality and influence on all of the panelists was absolutely visible from their focused and succinct presentation. They are still dead. They are vibrating with the influence of sister, and I didn't have any problem in identifying all the alumni of Sister Nivedita Girls School. They spanned over 30 years from, pass out of 1985 to 2015, but they are singing the same song with same enthusiasm, with same conviction. And this is really something very wonderful for all of us to, attend and experience. And this reminds me of sisters' own predictions. I am just quoting from three of sisters' prediction, one in 1903. Sister wrote that I would like much to make number 17 a real university settlement. And in 1906, she wrote that, you see, when we who understand Swamiji and remember him are dead, there will come a long period of obscurity and silence. In 150 or 200 years, it will be found to have transformed the West. And again in 1909, Sister is writing, my thoughts will be worked out by unnumbered generations, and I would rather be penniless than cease to be an idealist. What words! It is surprising to note that predicted time has come, and the young generation is taking up different initiatives to spread sisters' ideals and ideologies all over the globe. Sister Nivedita Heritage Museum and Knowledge Center has been set up in number 16 Bospara Lane and open to general public from March 2020. Nivedita Institute of Human Advancement and Research, NIHAR, has started its journey from number 17 Bospara Lane. We all are feeling in core of our heart Swamiji's voice, India shall ring with her. The time has come. So this, we are going to conclude this wonderful evening with a song of Angshupriya Mondol, a pass out of 1988 from RKSM, Sister Nivedita Girls School. So now, Angshupriya.
It is from YouTube to connect করবে তুমি বলে দাও
প্রাণে আধারে গায়ে গায়ে পরশ তব সারা ভোটাক তারা নব নব আধারে গায়ে গায়ে পরশ তব সারা ভোটাক তারা নব নব নয়নের দৃষ্টি হতে বুঝবে কালো যেখানে পড়বে সেখানে দেখবে আলো নয়নের দৃষ্টি হতে বুঝবে কালো যেখানে পড়বে সেখানে দেখবে আলো ব্যথামত উঠবে জ্বলে ঊর্ধ্বপানে ব্যথামত উঠবে জ্বলে ঊর্ধ্বপানে আগুনের পরশমণি ছোঁয়া প্রাণে এসে